Thanks for tuning into the Replatform podcast sponsored by Ambulance and Klaviyo. You're listening to myself, James Gayard, and my can't even say that today. That's twice, Paul. Can't say the word co-host. I don't want to acknowledge you. And my co-host, Paul Rogers. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. How are you doing?
Well, apart from the speech problems, I'm absolutely marvellous today. Thanks very much. So we got another cracking episode lined up. Firstly, a big thank you to regular listeners for tuning back in. And if this is the first time you listen to the podcast, thanks very much for giving us the time. We hope you enjoy it and we don't scar you and prevent you from coming back to listen to another one. If you subscribe, you'll get new episode alerts. We drop one every week, and we'd love a like on YouTube, Spotify, Apple if the content's good enough for you. Right. So, Paul, do you want to set up the episode? So we're basically diving into the world of Shopify and Shopify Plus and looking at where the platform's at now. But do you want to give a bit more of a background to the purpose of the episode?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we did a similar-ish episode. It must have been about 18 months ago now, maybe, with Piers on his own, which was really well received and our second highest ever listened to episode. So we've been talking about doing this for a while, and we invited Dan and Piers on as the two most knowledgeable people I've met around Shopify. So this episode really is just to look at kind of what's changed recently with Shopify, kind of the state of some of the new stuff like 2.0 and Headless and Markets, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a few other areas in there as well, but I think, it'll be a really good one. We haven't done too much kind of deep diving around Shopify. So I think it'd be a good episode.
Cool. So let's do welcome. So Piers, do you want to introduce yourself? I know a lot of people will know you both, but some won't. So who are you? What do you do? And give us a bit of a background about the business.
Thanks, James. Hi all. My name is Piers, and I'm one of the founders of We Make Websites. We are a Shopify Plus agency, and we're based in London. And my co-founder Alex is in New York, and we design, develop, and optimize Shopify Plus websites for international brands. We've been doing it for almost 13 years now.
Amazing. Thanks very much. Glad to have you back on. And Dan, welcome to your first experience. As you said earlier, we're popping your Replatform podcast cherry.
You're popping my podcast one. Yeah, I've never been on one. So it's a nice experience for me. So I'm Dan. I'm the development director at BAO. Kind of been a dev now for well over 10 years. I say well over, probably just over 10 years. Been at BAO for just coming up to 5 years. But BAO, one of a Shopify Plus partner, kind of specialize and kind of, I guess, main focus is, we aim to be the Shopify Plus agency for the world's most design-conscious luxury brands. That's the vertical we tend to work in. So, that's me and BAO in a nutshell.
Lovely. So I'll ask the first question, and this one's for you, Piers. So obviously 2.0 and sections everywhere has been a massive topic of conversation for a number of years, and that's now available. So firstly, how have you found working with that? How have your clients found working with that? And I think more interestingly, how have you seen 2.0 impact the demand for Headless with Shopify?
Okay, so how have our clients found it first? Then I'll focus on that. So I think everyone's excited about it. It's one of the changes in Shopify that I guess a lot changes in Shopify all the time, and sections everywhere was such a big talked about thing. Its sort of launch was delayed, and all of our clients were champing at the bit to get hold of it. Really, I think the product, I mean, it's good. It came with along with some other releases that made it a much better content management experience for brands. I think we've added it to a number of our client stores that sort of already existed, but the most success we've had with it is on sort of new builds, where really taking advantage of the new theme architecture and I guess not having to sort of backfill it in. The last part of your question was how's it affected things versus Headless, and I think that's a really good question, because that is a really hot topic for a lot of our sort of new business stuff at the moment. Like Headless has often been sold incorrectly in Shopify land, and I've seen countless examples of people going headless that shouldn't have. And I think part of that was performance, but part of that was feeling like, we can really manage our content better here, and use Contentful and whatever. And I think sections everywhere helps a bit sort of kill off that argument. And it's certainly been do you want to build your store on Online Store 2.0, or do you want to go headless is a big question that people come to us directly with. I'm not sure it's necessarily the right question, but it is a question people come to us with. And this the performance of Online Store 2.0 and what we can do with it. And it's more flexible in terms of content management. And I'm happy to deep dive on all that later on. Does eliminate some of those arguments for headless, certainly.
So a related question for you, Piers, and then Dan, I'd be interested in your perspective on this, is I know you've worked on headless projects, and you said like sometimes people go down that route and they don't necessarily need it. It obviously does add some complexity. What's your view on where headless is needed? Like, how does Shopify headless, what problems does it solve? And what business use cases have you seen that are really good?
Well, we've got a wonderful article on our blog that answers this question in great detail that my co-founder wrote. But yeah, the times. So first thing to say, I would say, is that the reason it's often wrong for people is you immediately lose the benefits of a platform a lot of benefits of a platform like Shopify, because you can't just plug in apps from the ecosystem so easily anymore, because you've detached the front end from Shopify. So you're running typically a standalone front end that's detached from Shopify, and therefore, you want to add a reviews app. It's a lot more work now. You want to add personalization. It's a lot more work now. And you're also maintaining and hosting and looking after a separate front end. So you're losing some of the sort of nice bits that Shopify do for you. So that's something that people don't necessarily realize. And Paul, I know you've seen some of this where people have gone headless and then come back to Shopify because they didn't quite realize the maintenance cost and I suppose the added cost there. The other part of the question, why should people do it? I think if you are a large business with the funds to do it and the sort of probably technical team on the brand side as well, then it is a reasonable thing to look at. I think the main reasons we see that are strong reasons are shared content across multiple different channels. So you've got a centralized content management system and you want to push that to your website or multiple websites. It might be across different brands. It could also be across different properties, like an app, for example. So when you start getting into that, then that architecture does make more sense, because you're not managing so many different separate Shopify things and a separate app on another platform, for example. So you sort of centralized your content management. So and likewise, where we've done it also in the past is where the brand is more of a content engine or a content producing brand than it is a shop, and therefore why build everything around Shopify? That'd be another good example. A third one might be big internationalization. So like you've got a big international architecture, and I think we're going to get into Shopify's own internationalization sort of thing with Shopify Markets, but that only takes you so far, and it's quite nuanced. But if you've got a big international presence and you're doing lots of things in different stores in different international markets, this headless architecture can also make sense. Performance is still one of them as well, but I don't think you should go headless just for performance reasons. But also, you can get a more performant website if you do.
I'm glad you said that, though, because sometimes that's the magic pill that's sold as the sole reason, and it feels quite a tenuous one to build an entire business case on that alone. So it's interesting to hear that. Dan, I'd love to hear your perspective. I'd love to hear what have you guys discovered about working on doing headless Shopify? What use cases have you found that are relevant, and how actually as a business have you found it internally working with the headless options?
Yeah, I mean, I can't do as good of a job as Piers just done. Like, he's kind of touched on a lot of the points really that kind of cover it. So like for me, like an additional use case which we found is like kind of almost small capsule sites where, the intent is a very, I guess, kind of almost experiential experience, something that is just, it's achievable on Shopify, but if you've kind of got the full, stack behind you with a headless build, you can kind of just do a bit more, kind of not be refined. But as soon as you start, I think, venturing into a more normal size catalog and you kind of going beyond 10, 15 products, then you need to have a very, very, very good use case. Like one of the ones Piers mentioned that we've kind of done recently is just a large international architecture. One of the benefits you get when going down the headless route with that is you can still offer a single storefront instead of having to replicate a theme across 10 Shopify Plus stores. Depending on kind of how you set it up, you can get away with a single code base, which is appealing. I think another use case as well is when if you're in discovery and you start to realize that you're going to have to bend liquids and kind of Shopify's online store in many weird and wonderful ways, which I think you do have to do for, kind of larger, more enterprising merchants. If that starts to become technical debt in the theme, then, the technical debt that comes with headless, again, becomes more appealing. In terms of the impact in the business, for me, it's a really interesting one in that it can, to a degree, cause a split. So obviously I'm very development led and, you can effectively have these devs can work on it and these devs can't, which is something that's not ideal. You do then have to start having, I guess, more specialized teams internally, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it's nice, I think, when you kind of, with Shopify, their storefront, just, anyone being able to contribute to it, I think is, from a business perspective, a much kind of nicer approach to it. I guess just touching on 2.0 as well, for me, it's been a kind of almost like a lovely breath of fresh air. I think kind of what they've released, I know it went through kind of many iterations when they announced it back in Unite in, was it 2019, 2020, kind of the last Canada one. It was a very different version of what it is now. I think they went through 3 or 4 different versions, but I think a lot of the pain points that came with it initially have kind of been eradicated. I think they've done a really good job at kind of listening to the community, things like section limits, block limits, template limits. This was a real pain point that you kind of weren't really aware of. Initially there was a 50 template limit where, many merchants, very content-led ones as well, want to create a lot of templates. So we were hitting that kind of left, right, and center. So I think they've done a really good job kind of rolling with it. I think the Metafield kind of introduction they've done as well, treating that as a first-class citizen has been a really good addition to it as well. With it's nice to just see them have a much more kind of content focus with it, and I'm really looking forward to the content kind of module they showcased at the last Unite as well. That looks like that's got some really interesting things tied to it. And, as Piers mentioned, that 2.0 has kind of not swayed things back in Shopify's kind of direction when it comes to headless. It's made the conversation more interesting. I think when that comes out, that can, eradicate a lot of use cases for headless. So, I'm really interested, looking forward to that as well.
Great, yeah, that makes sense, and some really interesting points there. So beyond 2.0 and beyond some of the headless pieces, there's been a lot of other changes to the development side of Shopify and kind of new API endpoints and different ways of kind of working with Shopify. How have you found the development side or have you seen it kind of get better for you and your team? And also, what are some of the biggest improvements beyond the ones you've already talked about?
So, I mean, for me personally, I think it's got a lot better because it's allowed us to shed a lot of weight. So kind of, I guess, pre 2.0, 1.0 days, I don't know if that's kind of what we call it now. We had a very heavy build system. So it was a case of, getting people kind of, new hires up and running was it was a process, a documented process. Whereas now with Shopify's, it feels like, again, slight change of focus to kind of, I think, improving their dev tooling. Now we've managed to shed away most of that and literally just kind of go all in with what Shopify's offering is, with their Shopify CLI. That's been really refreshing. I think a big part of the build system previously was, having to, browser support and, kind of CSS pre-processing. Now with the way kind of everything's kind of evergreen and Internet Explorer kind of finally being sunsetted, you really can just kind of go back to basics almost, like not having to compile JavaScript. You can just write in the browser straight up, kind of writing vanilla CSS. It's been a really nice change to just kind of, go back to basics with it. So what was your second question then? Sorry.
Just some of the other things that you've seen improve from a development perspective. It could be, other APIs or additional kind of tooling bits.
Yeah, so I think another thing that's been really interesting is, I think it's kind of been like a last couple of years thing, but then they did a change very recently as well. As like, I think historically they've always been like a Ruby and like Rails kind of offering, and all of their kind of app side that they would open source was always Ruby based. And it seems nowadays, like I said, in the last couple of years, they're kind of trying to do a bit more Node and PHP, which I think is a good move from them. I think Ruby, it's not a niche language, but I think, Node and PHP are much more wider available. And I think there's a bigger pool of developers that do it. So I think it's a really good move from their perspective, opening up like their focus to tools like that. Their Node kind of app library recently has gone through a complete change. And I think that's been made way more accessible. It felt like previously they were just like, they used Next.js, which is like a very kind of cool thing, and then they almost went backwards by kind of going back to Express, which has been around for donkeys, and that felt like a really good solid change from them to just again open themselves up to like a wider dev audience. I think it's just nice to see, I think, another, I guess, reinvigorated kind of focus on dev, because it felt like it was a little bit lacking kind of in the few years before, say like the last 12 months.
Makes sense. And then Piers, there's a question for you. So I think one of the biggest kind of like PR talking points over the last kind of 12 months has been the release, or like the general release, of Markets. And there's a lot of debate around kind of where this is at the moment. What's your view on this? Based on your experiences, how have you found it? How have your clients found it so far?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. So just to step back and sort of say what Markets is to start with, it isn't a huge amount of new stuff. It's really collecting and sort of packaging up things that were already in there. Multi-language API was already there before they called it Markets. There was multi-currency to a degree, and there was some other things around tax and all that sort of stuff. But now they've packaged it up and they're starting to truly develop it as a product, really. I think that's helped because, one, it's changed the perception of Shopify a little bit, because historically it's not been seen as that strong for international commerce. It was basically like, we do international, you just have to create a store for every single country on earth. And I think that, as an agency, that's something we battled with since, I don't know, like as soon as Shopify Plus, or maybe even before that, we were building sort of store syncing apps to like get around that problem of managing multiple stores. Markets, I think is a good thing. It's something we've used on several site builds over the last year or so. There's still a use case to split out and have a separate store for a particular geographical location or a market, if you will. It's certainly not a killer complete feature set yet, but it does mean you can easily trade or enter into new markets much more easily than you used to be able to, without having to spin up another store. I think from what I know, it seems like the feature set is getting improved at a fairly quick rate. I think we'll see it over the next year get even better, and then you'll start seeing stores consolidate, Shopify brands on Shopify consolidating their stores down. We've already seen that a little bit.
I've got one question, just I guess an outside observer who's not as well versed in the Shopify ecosystem as you all are. From my understanding, that basically single storefronts can't in Markets don't support multi-currency. Is that correct?
They do. So now, you can support multi-currency on a single storefront, and you can have separate price lists for those currencies. And yeah, I mean, the caveat is that it's not on all payment gateways, and it's often an entry into you need to use Shopify payments. As with all things Shopify, so that's part of their business model. But yeah, for a while now, you've been able to do multi-currency. You can't, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think you can get paid out.
You can.
So if you've got 10 currencies, you still get paid out in your base currency. Yeah. I assume so. Shopify can make some money on the FX rate, but that is my cynical view. But I think that is something that our clients definitely raise, and another reason maybe to split things out. But you've been able to do that for a while, I think it came as, firstly, you can show currency, then you can trade in the currency. Now you can set price lists, and so I assume it will naturally get better and better as over time.
So it'd be interesting then, Dan, your perspective on having used Markets for multi-language, multi-currency projects. Is it quite a smooth process now? Are there any kind of gotchas people need to be wary of as merchants?
Yeah, I mean, I think the currency one's an interesting one, because I remember when it was announced, it was such an exciting thing to announce, but then it was kind of almost, it was like rounding or like a set amount, and it kind of really wasn't that usable. It was like this amazing feature that had very niche use cases. And then it evolved to the point of you can import a CSV of certain things based on like a country. And then again, there was no GUI, there was no bit in the admin for it. It was quite frictionful, quite a lot of friction to it. Whereas now, there is a GUI for it in the admin. It's a much more nicer process. You just kind of go to market, choose your products, change your price on it. You can do, $5 in the US, £20 in Germany, £20 or €20 in Germany, €20 in France. You can kind of literally do what you want now. So that's been a lovely kind of evolution. It took a little bit to get there, but that's a much nicer experience. In terms of like Markets, we pretty much have it on all builds currently. I think there's definitely some caveats to it. There's a lot. I say we're finding a few around kind of SEO as well and paid search. There's some interesting ones around that don't really have a true answer to yet. I think we all want to live in a world where you can get away with one storefront and just kind of, you don't then have to, even on Plus, have 3, 4, 5 different things. I think as Piers alluded to, the content management problems that come with that are just frustrating, to say the least, for the merchant. Content, especially with translations, I think with Markets at the moment is still a little bit tricky. I think, if you truly want to offer kind of multi-language offerings, then sections, you kind of almost need, if there's a title and you're offering 3 markets, you might need 3 kind of title fields, 1 for English, 1 for French, 1 for German. It's not the most elegant. I think as well, it still relies on relatively heavy meta field usage for some of the kind of product translation stuff. So the kind of, again, UI for that's getting there, but I think it's probably part of this Shopify kind of slow burn, where in a year's time, I think it's going to be a much nicer kind of experience than it is now. I think there's tax implications as well, which are also, I guess, interesting to say the least. It feels like it, at face value, it's nice. I think there's just a few things that at the moment they just kind of need to, I guess, iron out the edge. I think the big one that we found that turn merchants away from it is, as Piers kind of alluded to, the payout being in the base currency. That's a big problem for merchants. It's something that Shopify have got on their roadmap. They have released a roadmap for Markets. So, hopefully, and I'm sure they'll kind of get to that over the next kind of 3 to 6 months, which I'm looking forward to. I think there was one more thing on it. I can't remember the older. I think as well, what they're looking to do is something around themes and proper kind of localization of content, which I think I'm really looking forward to. It's Markets is the most exciting thing since kind of 2.0, which I guess only kind of took 9-12 months to follow. But it's not a golden bullet to all the answers yet, but I think it's got promise to be, and I think that's the really exciting thing around it. It's been a lot of power into merchants' hands. Yeah,
I think that thing around having content specific to your locale is a really powerful one. I really hope the implementation of that is good. And similarly, like product catalog splitting per locale properly, because that's not well. Yeah, at the moment you're basically hiding products in a hacky way if you want to do that. So yeah, I think that anything around that is going to be better than what we've got now. But I'm really hoping for something big there.
Yeah, I think one just last thing I was going to add to that as well is I think Piers alluded to it, like one of the best things about Shopify Storefront is the app ecosystem. I think because Markets is still relatively fresh, I think apps still catching up with it as well. So I think as is the way with all kind of Shopify new releases, there is kind of a bit of a slow trickle with like the app ecosystem kind of catching up. You know, things like big, kind of apps like Clevu and Klaviyo and whatnot. I think they just take a little bit of time because they're large. They can't just pivot on a dime with Shopify. So I think things like that, when they catch up as well, it's going to see a lot more adoption.
Yeah. That is definitely one of the gotchas. I'd say, you're getting your search and filtering app to play nicely with Shopify's translations. Although that said, if you're using a sort of different translations tool like a Weglot or something like that, it's still non-trivial to get that stuff working. And anytime he's trying to do multi-language on a single store, there's an element of pain when you've got sort of multiple systems in play.
What is Amplience? In a word, it's freedom. The freedom to build a digital experience as limitless as your vision. Create, preview, schedule, and manage all your content in one easy place. Find out more at amplience.com. Amplience. Experience freedom.
Yeah, I think between the two of you, you've answered the next question pretty much. The only one thing I'd add to that, the only other frustration we've seen, I think there's 3 reasons we've seen people not use it. So one recently has been some of those little tax bugs. Main one is payouts, and then multi-warehouse is the only other one. So you still need to split stores by warehouse, I think. So you can't assign a location yet to a market, if I'm correct, I think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can have multiple locations, but yeah, I think that's the thing you're talking about is probably correct still.
Yeah. So then I think, James, do you want to ask your next question?
Yeah, I wanted to chat about B2B because I find it interesting. I know that Shopify's got wholesale, but from having looked at it, it doesn't feel like it's got a robust B2B feature set versus the way BigCommerce. I mean, it's one of the areas BigCommerce has pushed on. It's got other limitations compared with Shopify. It always is. Nothing's perfect. But I know that there is a B2B feature set and there is a beta, but I don't know enough about it. I'd love to know what are your thoughts about it? Is Shopify going to get more serious with B2B? Have you got any insights you can share with our listeners on whether the feature set for B2B natively is going to expand?
Well, I don't know if I've got any insights really, but I mean, I think it's got to happen. And they bought a B2B company, and I forget the name of it now. But what was that, Paul?
Handshake.
Oh yeah, Handshake, and then that turned into a strange B2B sort of marketplace thing, which I don't think anyone was asking for. But my understanding is there's this new B2B product on the way, and I haven't personally seen it, but I think someone on our team have. I think one of our clients is looking at the beta of it. But as with all things Shopify, I would expect the first cut of it will be quite light. I'm expecting it to be better than Shopify's wholesale channel, if any of you familiar with that. But that was super basic, no control for the merchant around aesthetic or catalog management really, and I think this will be a theme-based approach, but I haven't personally seen it. I think it's always a problem for us, and we certainly have seen that people choose other platforms as a result of that. There are a couple of decent B2B plugins that we've used in the past with clients, but they're all sort of hamstrung by the way Shopify works, in the sense that they typically all push in a draft order into Shopify, and then that can't work with multicurrency, for example, in Shopify Markets. It's that problem you just described, Dan. Like apps keeping up with Shopify, but this time it's actually a Shopify limitation that means the app can't keep up with it. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a problem. It's been something I've wanted for a long time, because it's always sort of thrown up there as an example where Shopify is weak.
Yeah, I think this is why we have these conversations, because no platform is perfect, and it's very good at a lot of things, and it can't suit every use case. But it seems an interesting gap. Dan, what's your perspective? I know you said you work with a lot of like boutique high-end brands. Do you work in the B2B space, or is it mainly B2C?
It's mainly B2C, but we have got some historic kind of B2B solutions out there. I mean, like, unfortunately, I can't offer any insight into this product. I have had no access to that, but again, like B2B and wholesale is something that I think comes up enough, and it's just it's one of the few things on Shopify where there's just no real one accepted way to do it. For us, and it's become now a bit more muddy with Markets, been an example of an app not kind of keeping up to date, but like Shopify script editor. So if they're on Plus, like, we've offered kind of the typical ways we find is you'll either have a secondary store that's wholesale specific, it's locked behind customer accounts, and then they use that. Problem you've now got is you've effectively kind of got two themes to maintain, because you're almost certainly going to have some form of differentiation between the stores, and that becomes a problem. We've also done it where it's kind of just built into the same theme, and then we use script editor to effectively kind of discount on bulk or do something along the lines of that. But then with the addition of Markets, the script editor does not work elegantly with multi-currency at all. So you're kind of, again, limited there. And then I think, some people have unfortunately decided to go away from the platform just because there is no offering. The B2B channel is, I don't know if it's used, I guess I'll put it that way. I think it's being kind. It's to say it's limited it's quite limited. So yeah, we always try and come up with some solution that's theme based, is kind of like our typical approach to a lot of these things. But it's done it. It's definitely done it. But I think, like as mentioned, with recent acquisitions, I'm hoping to see a much better kind of offering over the next 12 to 18 months from Shopify. I think it's a big kind of market that they're potentially missing out on, and there's a lot there for it.
The big core missing piece is the price lists in the core platform, because the discounting piece is always a nightmare for anyone I've seen trying to do it when you're like connecting an ERP and all of that stuff. I think that's the main missing piece. But we've had one client that's been invited into the beta, which I think that starts like pretty soon, within the next month or two. I've seen nothing from it either, but I thought that was quite exciting, and I think they've got a call soon to like go through like the initial offering, which is cool. So I will ask the next question, and this one I'll ask Piers first, just purely because you've just been talking, Dan. I guess Shopify Flow, so feature that gets referenced a lot, is quite unique to Shopify. Not too many other platforms have like an equivalent. There's a lot of talk around how it might continue to develop and like what else it might integrate with, et cetera. How do you see Shopify Flow developing alongside Shopify? Like, do you see it potentially going down the Alloy route and kind of building out ERP integrations and all of that kind of stuff? What kind of direction do you see for Flow?
Good, interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I could certainly see it spinning off. I'm not sure if Shopify would do that, really. I think it's a really powerful tool for merchants that want to play around with it. And I think, some of our clients don't use it at all, and some of our clients absolutely love it. And I think if you're also working with a tech stack where the other third party apps have built integrations with Flow, you can do some really powerful stuff with it. I think it has helped us solve problems at a low cost for a client in the past really well. I mean, I'd love to see it develop even more.
And Dan, same question. Like, what's your view on kind of where they might take it?
Yeah, so I mean, Flow's been one of these kind of interesting ones where it's always been there, but it feels, again, like in the last kind of 6 to 12 months, they've taken a really kind of reinvigorated view on it. I think the kind of change to make it a non-plus feature is a really interesting one. I think it's only it's not a bad thing. It's only a good thing. to echo Piers as well, is I think with a lot of their recent updates, it's enabled us to kind of offer solutions that historically would have needed like some form of app or some kind of, actual, I guess, backend / server piece to it. Shopify Flow's kind of got us most of the way there, and then we've had to do a little bit on the side. I think it's a really interesting thing with Shopify in that they don't offer. It's one of these things where they've kind of given you the power to do everything. They've kind of given you a bit of a sandbox, and then you're free to do what you want. I think a big push towards apps, kind of an extension to Flow. I think that's a really good thing. I think, a lot of their recent acquisitions as well, it feels like there's a relatively easy plug and play now. If you don't have an app, you can kind of get it going with Flow, which I think is also interesting. Yeah, I mean, as far as how it might develop, I think, again, with the kind of, I guess, push down the extensions route, I think you're going to find that apps, kind of offering a lot more Flow integration, especially now it's a non-plus feature. I think one thing that app developers probably struggle with quite a lot is, Shopify Plus is a lucrative market to target, but it's a much smaller market with, Flow being broadened out, and it wouldn't surprise me if it does trickle down the plans on Shopify as well. I'd like to see that. Then I think, app developers are going to take a much more focused view on it, which is only a good thing for everyone. I think one of the other things they seem to be doing as well is they seem to kind of be getting feature parity with their GraphQL API. Before, it seemed to be a bit of a subset of like some of the fields, but not all of the fields. And so I'll go to do something because I know the API has it, but for some reason Shopify Flow didn't. And that was especially kind of, I guess, a little bit frustrating around orders and customers, because I think that's where Flow's mainly used. So it seems like they're trying to really match up against their GraphQL API, which again, I think is only a good thing. I think, again, just spreading, I guess, the awareness and just, kind of how both work, I think is a good thing. I'm interested to see what they've got on the horizon with it. It's like I said, it's another thing they're focusing on, and it's one of the more exciting bits of Shopify as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see it be used for more some of the integration stuff in the future, and kind of like the alloys and mechanics and some of those other ones can do. They build it out. So another question. So I've changed this question slightly, and Piers, I'll go to you first again. Where do you see? So you obviously talked to a lot of merchants that are presumably reviewing multiple platforms. Where do you see Shopify winning? What do you see as like the real key kind of advantages that other platforms can't really compete with?
Okay, so where do I see it winning? I think it is still much lower cost of ownership and quicker to develop on than the big platforms that we come up against. So for context, we're coming up against things like Salesforce, Commerce Cloud, and Hybris, and potentially things like commerce tools. People might be choosing between a headless approach and Shopify, and also Magento. And generally speaking, I'm still of the view that Shopify is you get more for your money. I think its app ecosystem is incredibly strong, and its partner ecosystem, and that is a huge strength. The fact that most things have got some sort of plug and play integration with Shopify is great. Not that we always use it, because the clients we're working with might have more complex requirements, but it's nice that it's there. I think the fact that you've got so many good agencies to choose from as well is a real benefit. It lifts us all up, and it means that and the other thing about the way you develop with Shopify is you're not ever tied into an agency, because it's very easy to pick up. It's kind of I've inherited things from other platforms where the code base was so bespoke to what that other agency could support. You just don't see that in Shopify. You rarely see it unless someone's totally butchered it somehow. The partner and app ecosystem, incredible strength. And I also think the brand is a strength, right? Like it's if you're a direct to consumer brand, and certainly that one that's digitally native formed in the last 10 years, you're probably not going to look at any other platform. It's really only the larger, more established businesses that would be considering something else. So that in itself is a real strength. I can do weaknesses as well, but I suspect that's.
I think we've covered a few of those key ones. That's what I was keen to talk about. But I think that's a really good point you make, because I've worked on fewer Shopify projects than I have like BigCommerce and Magento. I mean, I'm agnostic. I don't care as long as the platform choice is right for the business. But I've definitely seen that amongst brand-driven organizations where the instinct is, why not Shopify rather than should we? And I think that's very different to other organizations that might be more traditional businesses or more, I'm not going to say complex, that's the wrong word. But less brand driven. And that's, then the mindset seems to be slightly different. So it's an interesting point that you've made out there. I'd love to hear from, so Dan, what's your view? So you're both really busy at the moment. You're winning new projects. You've got existing clients. What makes the new business you win commit to Shopify rather than other platforms?
I mean, I think Shopify has gained a lot of validation over the last 12 to 18 months. There's been kind of multiple IPOs on Shopify now. It's I think it's kind of shed its skin in terms of its previous reputation, and it's really kind of coming out swinging as an actual solution to any ecom business, not just the kind of more SME ones, which I think has been needed for them to kind of reach that next level. I think again, I think you phrased it well when you kind of say, why not Shopify? I think that's the kind of how they've managed to position themselves now. I can completely echo Piers' things of, you get so much bespoke and so much tech debt, and Shopify is so simple. It's simple to the point where merchants can't understand how simple it is. You kind of almost get to like launch process, and it's like, just hook your domain up and you're done. And like, I think that really embodies like Shopify as a whole. And I think that kind of like trickles all the way down. Like effectively, theming it is a relatively straightforward, kind of getting most of the features up and running is, sometimes as simple as installing an app. Again, I think depending on the size of the merchant, it's not always that simple, but it just offers a level of simplicity that just literally doesn't exist in a typically complex like ecosystem. Most of the time you're getting a server up and running, making sure email blasts don't take the server down, and like hosting costs, and having like DevOps and SysOps, and it's none of it exists. I think it's such a strong offering. In terms of how I think it's going to continue to evolve, I think they've made a really heavy, I think I've kind of alluded to it before, I think they seem to be focusing a lot on their kind of developer experience, and Shopify do Shopify really well, and they support their kind of partner ecosystem because they know that like supports them and holds them up. I think Shopify provides a lot of the foundation, and then they rely on the partner ecosystem to fill in the gaps effectively, because things like Scripts 2.0. So at the moment, the way kind of Shopify's more bespoke kind of scripting things work, they are just plus specific, and they're kind of, but with Scripts 2.0, it seems like they're going to be app driven. So I think again, Shopify they've revealed what they're going to do. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the thing that's released, but from what I'm seeing so far, it's going to be kind of app driven. So again, this puts the power of truly kind of checkout kind of customization in app developers' hands, which again is just going to be, I think for the merchant, just a wonderful offering. You don't now need an agency to do relatively bespoke kind of discounting and offering and all this that, you currently need an agency to do for you. I think that's going to be incredibly powerful. The content feature that I mentioned earlier that they kind of showcased at Unite, that seems them trying to do a bit of a land grab for like the headless and the kind of contentful space. That can be an incredibly powerful thing. Hydrogen, I mean, you can kind of like, that's going to be, that to me is, I feel like I've said it a few times, but one of the most exciting things potentially. It sounds like they're going to, really truly embrace it, not kind of like, here's a thing you can use if you want to. It does seem like it's going to be very integrated into the platform. So, taking it feels hard to call it a headless thing because it is going to be very tightly kind of integrated into Shopify. They're spending a lot of time with that and putting a lot of attention towards that in the storefront API. So
just quickly on that, because some people might not understand what that means. Like hydrogen, can you just, for people who are new to the Shopify, what is hydrogen?
Yeah.
What is the relevance to like retailers, I guess, or is it purely for developers that it's relevant?
No, I think it's definitely going to, at the moment, it seems to require some form of developer input. I don't think a merchant's necessarily going to be able to get up and running like they could installing a theme from the theme store, and now they've kind of got a storefront. So on Shopify at the moment, when you get a Shopify account up and running, you effectively have an admin panel and you have a storefront. You can kind of go to an agency, kind of get a theme from the theme store, and then you're kind of good to go. And hydrogen is effectively, I guess, their version of headless. I don't know if it's fair to call it headless, but I think, for ease, it's kind of their take on headless. So they've effectively kind of built their own framework from the ground up that would allow developers and kind of merchants to have a much more customized approach to the theme, like to the storefront. So Shopify, like your products are going to be under a certain URL, your collections are going to be under a certain URL, everything's going to be like the same as every other single like Shopify store on the platform, which is really good. There's nothing wrong with that, but hydrogen's just going to allow you to truly, from the kind of almost ground up, assuming you want to go with it, like completely customize your storefront. You effectively have full control of your rendering. You're kind of, from someone pressing enter on your URL to presenting the page, you now have full control of that, as opposed to like the last little bit where you kind of control how it looks. And yeah, that's what Hydrogen is. They're also pairing it with like their own hosting as well. So I think one of the pain points you run into with Headless is you're now effectively kind of in charge of the hosting and, kind of actually serving it. Whereas Shopify's Liquid and Storefront is all handled by Shopify. So Shopify offering, again, a completely seamless, like, we'll handle it, don't worry about it. You just kind of do the theme, do the build, we'll handle the rest, is, again, I think an incredibly powerful thing from their perspective that currently is a pain point. If you are going headless, kind of, you've done all that. Now, where do we put it is also another problem, keeping it going, keeping it running, making sure it doesn't fall down. Having Shopify handle all of that is a thing that I think often gets overlooked as a lovely peace of mind for merchants and agencies alike.
Yeah, I think the peace of mind bit and not having to like increase your own internal complexity to have it like that is definitely a big bonus. Really interesting. I mean, it's been really interesting for me because there's new stuff I've learned as well, because I don't spend as much time in Shopify world as you gents. So what would be useful is if anyone listening wants to bend your ears or challenge anything or get to question any more detailed stuff we talked about, how do they reach out to the respective businesses? Like, Piers, do you want to go first? If people want to speak to you or We Make Websites, how do they do it?
hello@wemakeWebsites.com. Just email us. Also, we're active on Twitter and LinkedIn and etc. Check out our website. Lots of good in-depth blog articles on all this sort of stuff, particularly markets, headless, all that sort of stuff that we try and keep up to date as things are moving, because it's always a bit of a moving target, all this stuff.
Fantastic, thanks. And Dan, how about you?
Yeah, so bao.agency or byassociationonly.com, the website, all of our kind of contact information is on there. We also just have Twitter as well, and then if you ever need anything from me personally, mine's just kind of _ Dan Campbell. I think I don't use it too much, but I can always direct you to the right place if none of that helps.
Cool. Thanks both of you for joining us. How was popping your podcast, Cherry, for you?
Delightful. Yeah, it's been a very pleasant experience.
Excellent. We'll see how many more cherries we can collect this year. Maybe that's our like deeply dodgy aim for the year, Paul. And thanks everyone for listening. As always, really do appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed it. There's lots of advice and insights around the Shopify world. Keep an ear open for next episode. We'll drop it every week, normally on a Tuesday. And we'd love you to subscribe if you don't already. Thanks very much.